Hey guys, I hope you're doing well. This is going to be your review video for your Chapter 1 test. So there's a few things that I need to go over since this is our first test that we're taking online. And each one of these bullet points is really important. So I'm going to go over each one of them, hopefully in enough detail to answer any questions that you might have. The first one is your no notes policy. Imagine if this was, and was supposed to be, a test that you were taking in the classroom. You wouldn't have notes, you wouldn't have your formulas, you would have to know them. So that's still going to apply for the test that you're taking through Big Ideas. You should not have any type of written work that you've already done previously. You must, however, have a piece of scratch paper, and this is very important because even if you complete the entire test, if you do not submit your work to me through a message in Remind, you can also email it to me, but I prefer it to be Remind because it's all condensed together that way. You have to do that before I will assign your grade. All right, so you get to the end of your test and you get a 90. That grade will not be entered into the grade book until you send me a picture of your scratch paper with your name on it also. Make sure you put your name on it. All right, and another thing that will be very helpful to me also is that you will number your work. So for number 1, it should say number 1 and then all of your work. These questions are impossible to do without you plugging them into the formulas and showing your work, as you're going to see throughout this entire video when I'm working these problems. There's work to be shown, and I just want to see that. All right, so if you're not on Remind, some of you are not. I've tried to message you just about different assignments. I'm going to ask you again to please download the app and put in my code TCA Math 8. Okay, so you should be doing this test independently, not with your parents, tutors, your classmates on the phone, all right? You should be doing this test by yourself. Now, this program, I hate that I even have to put this in there, but I've been watching some of your work come in through the portal, and what you don't see is what it looks like on my end. And there are several indicators that are coming back to me that are strongly indicating that there's some cheating going on the assignments that I've already given. Now, it's really, in a lot of ways, it's going to come down to your character and you just doing the right thing, but especially when it comes to a test, you need to be very mindful of the fact that the reporting that I get on my end is designed to minimize as much as possible and to give me warning signs when it catches some cheating factors. So all that being said, please do not put yourself in that position. All right, take this test exactly how I'm asking you to do it and show me how much you've learned in Chapter 10. All right, so say you get to a question you don't understand. You can skip through the questions using the arrows at the bottom of your screen. Just simply write down the number of the question that you skipped so you know which one to go back to. All right, it's pretty, point and simple right there. All right, so it's real important. You might even want to, write some of this down for sure. Actually, as I'm saying this, I think it would be really good for me just to send out this PowerPoint, so I'll be doing that as well. All right, so you'll have it in your email. Okay, so your formulas. Your formulas are the basis for Chapter 10. Without your formulas, you're completely dead in the water. All right, so you need to know your formulas. I did put them in your test as true-false questions, but your test is going to be randomized. So these might be the last 3 questions of your test, for all I know, or they might be the first 3. Okay, so they are in your test, but you do need to know them as well. All right, so there they are, and we're going to use them throughout the next few examples. Now, another thing I want to point out to you, every question that I've put in this review video there is a very similar question on your test. I did not leave anything out. So if you see me working a problem, that means that there is a very similar problem on the test that you're about to take. So think of this like a pre-test. All right, if you want to pause the video and try to work some of these problems before I do, I think that that would be a really great idea. Okay, so the first one, what shape is this? All right, if you said a cylinder, you're correct. You have to be able to identify what shape it is so you know what formula to use. All right, so because it's a cylinder, we're going to plug in V equals our formula, pi r squared h. Okay, well, for our pi values, we're going to use 3.14 times the radius. Okay, now, is this the radius? You should be saying no. We need to half it to find the radius. Square it and multiply it by the height. All right, so now, what do you think you're going to do next? If you said exponent, you are correct. We need to do 7.5 times 7.5. And we get 56.25. And now take 56.25 and multiply that by 5. You can just kind of continue that in your calculator. All right, so I'll go ahead and write this next step. Now we have 3.14 times 281.25. So take that number and multiply it by 3.14. So my volume is 883.125. And then of course we have our label meters cubed, okay, for volume. Now the next one is a cone. So literally I'm just going to use a different formula. Now my formula is going to be V equals 1/3 pi r squared h. Now, pi r squared, guys, remember, is the formula for the area of a circle. That's my base, all right? So that's why it's similar to what you saw with the cylinder. All right, so we're just going to plug in our numbers. Guys, this is most of the battle is just plugging in your numbers, especially when you're solving for volume. 1/3 times 3.14 times my radius, which it gave me 5, squared times the height of my cone. All right, so this one we could probably do mental math. What's 5 squared? All right, if you're saying 25, you're correct. 25 times 10 is 250. All right, so we're going to go V equals 1/3 times 3.14 times 250. Okay, we want to do this multiplication next. All right, do all our multiplication. We're going to divide at the end. 3.14 times 250 is 785. So V equals 1/3 times 785. All right, now, if you can kind of dig back a little bit, we've talked about multiplying a fraction times a whole number. And what happens when it's 1 over another number, that means you're simply dividing the whole number by whatever the denominator is. So if it's 1/3 of 785, that means you're dividing by 3. If it was 1/4, then you're dividing by 4. All right. Your directions on your test, I believe, will either say to round to the 10th or to round to the whole number. In this case, your volume is a repeating decimal, 261.6 repeating. If it says round to the nearest whole number, you know it's 262. If it says 10th, it would be 261.7. And then we label millimeters cubed. Okay? So it's real important that you know what to do with this fraction. The fraction means that you're dividing by something, okay? Essentially, that's all you're doing. All right, now the sphere. I think out of all of the figures, the sphere probably gave you the most trouble, at least from what I saw in some of your homework scores. All right, so we have volume equals 4/3 times pi, 3.14, times your radius. Is this radius? All right, you should be saying no. Cut it in half. And cubed. Okay, so 6 to the third power. Remember, we always want to do exponents first, so 4/3 times 3.14 times 216. I'm going to try to simplify this a little more for you. I don't know if I said it exactly this way in the 10.3 recording, but I think it might cut out some of the confusion from some of the questions I've gotten, okay? So again, the way I'm going to show you is not the only way to do it, but I want you to go ahead and do this multiplication. All right, so 3.14 times 216 is 678.24. Okay, so that 4/3 is still there, times 678.24. Okay, so now in the last problem, my numerator was a 1, so I just needed to divide by 3. Now what I want you to do is I want you to multiply the numerator by that number. Okay, so you're going to multiply that by 4, and then because it's a fraction, we're going to divide by 3. Okay, and that will give us our answer. So whenever we have this 4/3, and goodness, it's probably for the sphere total, it may be 4 or 5 questions of your test, so it's a decent amount of your test. Whenever you have this 4/3 come into play, I want you to multiply the number by 4 and then divide it by 3. Okay, that might take some practice, but I'm telling you, you won't go wrong if you do it that way. So the volume of the sphere equals 904.32 yards cubed. All right, so that's finding the volume of all 3 of the figures that we learned in chapter 10. All right, so what if it's an unknown dimension? And remember, guys, these questions are straight from your test. I just changed a few numbers. So now if you're finding an unknown dimension, you still have to know what kind of figure you're looking at. Okay, so what kind of figure is this? If you said cylinder, you're correct. So volume equals pi r squared times h. But now you know the volume, so you've got to plug it in there for volume. 176 equals 3.14 times your radius, 4, because 8 was the diameter, so you cut it in half, squared h. All right, so 4 squared we know is 16. So 3.14 times 16 is 50.24. So we have 176 equals 50.24 h. And now we divide both sides by 50.24. Divided by 50.24, and we get about 3.5. All right, so the height is approximately 3.5. And again, on your test, is it inches or centimeters? It will very specifically say round to the 10th or round to the whole number. All right, so I gave you one in words because you do have a question that explains a figure in words. So you have to be able to find in the problem what kind of figure it is. So I want you to read through this problem. And you tell me, is it a cone, a sphere, or a cylinder? All right, you see this word right here? It's a cylinder. Cylindrical means cylinder. Okay, and look, it says the volume is 28 cubic meters. So that gets plugged in. All right, volume equals pi r squared h. That gets plugged in for volume. So you see, you've got to be able to kind of pick apart the problem and figure out which number goes in for which variable. All right, so 28 equals 3.14 times your radius. Do you know the radius? No. So times r squared times the height, which is 4. Okay, now in order to solve for radius, I am going to condense what I can. So 3.14 times 4 is 12.56. 28 equals 12.56 r squared. Now what do you think you'll do to both sides? You'll divide by 12.56. Right, so we have 28 divided by 12.56, and we get about 2.229. All right, equals r squared. All right, and now in order to solve for r, if you remember in the last chapter we learned how to get rid of this exponent, take the square root. So if we take the square root, 2.29, let's see, there's my square root. It's about 1.49 or 1.5. Okay, so r is approximately 1.5 meters. Okay, and you can see here in these directions it said round your answer to the nearest tenth. Okay, so they knew that it was going to kind of work out to be a weird problem. All right, so again, I mean, we've worked 5 problems so far, and look what was our very first starting point. It's just your formula. And then you plug in the numbers into your formulas and solve. All right, so you have 2 more. And again, I'm not giving you any extra, but I am making this a little more thorough than if we were in the classroom, because I'm not there with you, so I just want to make sure that you're really seeing all the types of problems that you'll see on your test. All right, so now, again, you've got to be able to, know that that's a cone. Okay, volume equals 1/3, because it's a cone, pi r squared h. All right, so now you know the volume, so where do you think that goes? 7,200. Equals 1/3 times 3.14 times your radius squared, which you know, but you don't know the height. So 15 squared is 225 times 3.14. And does anybody remember, what do we do with 1/3? How do we take 1/3 of 706.5? That's what I got when I multiplied this. So if you're saying to do 1/3, you divide by 3, you're exactly right. So I have 7,200 equals 235.5. And remember, I got that because I did my multiplication and then I divided by 3. H. Now divide both sides by 235.5. $7,200 divided by 235.5. All right, and again, most of the time it's going to say round to the nearest tenth. So I would say the height is approximately 30.6 yards. Okay, now the sphere. Okay, so if I put one with a radius to solve for, you're going to be solving a sphere for radius on your test. All right, so again, we're plugging in the numbers. Volume equals 4/3 pi r to the third, 288. That's my volume. Pi. I know that that's given some of y'all some trouble when it's a pi, so I want to make sure I put one of those in there. Equals 4/3 pi r to the third. Okay, so I'm going to show you a shortcut, and again, I may not have done it exactly this way in the 10.3 lesson, but I think that this will actually be easier, okay? Whenever they put this pi value in with the volume, okay? And if it's here, it means it's going to be on your test. Here's what I want you to do. we can actually divide whatever we do to one side, as long as we do it to the other, we're going to be okay. If you divide this side by pi, and you divide this side by pi, it doesn't matter what pi equal, pi divided by pi is just going to cancel down to 1. So now you have 288 equals 4/3 r to the third power. So now the whole 3.14 and multiplying and all of that, it's irrelevant. Now, if pi is not over here, then I've got to plug in 3.14 and do my multiplication. So it almost makes it easier because you can kind of just cancel it out. All right. So now, do you remember how to get a fraction to cancel out when it's connected to your variable? All right. If you're saying to flip it and multiply, you're exactly correct. So now you go 288 over 1 times 3/4. Okay, you could cross reduce if you want, you don't have to. 3 times 288 divided by 4 is 216 equals r to the third power. All right, so we're almost there. What do you think you would do last to solve for r? All right, if you say to cube root it, you are exactly correct. If you remember back to your perfect cubes, 216 is 1, and that's really nice when that works out. R equals 6 inches. All right, and we're done. So if and when your test gives you volume that has pi, just remember that you can actually just divide by pi to cancel it, and then you can keep solving. All right, 2 more problems and we're done. The cones are similar, so I need to find the missing slant height. All right, there's several ways that you can set up your proportion. Proportions are everything with similar figures, okay? What I want you to do is just make sure you're setting up matching dimensions in your ratio. So that means if you use radius for one, then put it over the radius for the other one. So we're going to say 5 over 7, x over y, equals 13 over L. Do our cross products, and we get 5L equals 13 times 7, which is 91. Divide both sides by 5. And 91 divided by 5 is 18.2. So L, I know it's kind of a weird variable to use for slant height, equals 18.2 yards. All right, so as long as you can set up your proportion, this is a pretty simple problem to solve. All right, so now let's do surface area. Again, I'm going to say it again. If I'm giving you a surface area problem with prisms, you're probably going to see one like that on your test. So it says find the surface area. So the first thing, well, it doesn't really matter which order we go in, but we can put surface area over surface area, which obviously we don't know that one. Okay, so we can say 608 over R for red, doesn't matter, S for surface area, equals 8 over 5. Now we do our cross product. 608 times 5 is 3,040. So 3,040 equals 8R, and divide both sides by 8. So 3,040 divided by 8 equals 380. So the surface area of the red prism equals 380 meters squared. Okay. I made this one a little more detailed than I probably would have had we been face to face, but it was really important to me to make sure that you guys really saw these are the types of problems that are going to be on your test. Let me just make sure we're done. Yep. Okay, so let me just remind you again, I'll go back to the rules real fast. The rules are going to be really important, okay? And It's going to come down to somewhat of your honesty, but I trust that we can keep the integrity of our testing even though we're not able to be together in person. If you have any questions at all, you guys know how to reach me, remind, or email, and I'll be happy to answer them. So I'm excited for week 3. I think it'll be a good week. The test is the biggest thing. So obviously we're going to be doing this first. And I'm also working on setting up some Zoom live help classes. So you'll be getting a link for your Zoom conferencing so we can kind of be face-to-face and work some problems together before you take your test next week. So that's it. That'll be everything for your Chapter 10 test review.